Did you know that in 2017, somebody actually proposed building a gigantic parking garage on top of Amsterdam's central station? This is crazy because Amsterdam is famous for its cycling and pedestrian infrastructure. But this plan might have made a lot of sense if we had traveled back in time to the 1960s. And now, I'm going to tell you the story of how Amsterdam became car-centric. It was a very different world in the 1960s. There were way fewer bicycles than cars, and most cities weren't designed for them yet. People would park wherever they could, and traffic was a nuisance, but it wasn't nearly as big of a problem as it would become. Amsterdam was especially problematic though, because it was built for people and not cars. All of those cute little streets and canals were great for pedestrians and cyclists, but they just got in the way of cars. And in 1964, things came to a head when two major royal weddings were planned within a month of each other. The first wedding was between Princess Beatrix and Claus von Habsburg, which took place in the early part of March. Shortly after that, the country's queen Juliana would pass the throne to her daughter, and a second wedding would take place between Princess Irene and Carlos Hugo of Bourbon-Parma. These weddings caused a political crisis in Amsterdam. The government expected tens of thousands of guests and tons of international press to arrive. The Queen's wedding alone was predicted to cost the city over 2 million guilders, or about 468,000 euros. There was no way that Amsterdam's tiny historic center could handle all these people without major construction. So the city had to choose what kind of construction would be best. They ended up choosing cars. They widened the roads, added parking lots, and did their best to get as many people driving as possible. That might sound like an awful idea today, but at the time, it was the status quo. In fact, it even continued long after the wedding madness died down. Car ownership grew rapidly throughout the Netherlands, and Amsterdam simply couldn't keep up. This is where our story gets really interesting, because Amsterdam had a secret weapon in their fight against cars. One that almost sounds ridiculous today, but was completely serious at the time. Their secret weapon was their own alderman, Pieter Oud. If you don't know who he is, he went on to become the Prime Minister of the Netherlands. But at the time, he was just an alderman trying to solve the city's transportation problems. Instead of getting rid of cars or even just slowing them down, Oud decided to double down and build more roads. He wanted everyone in Amsterdam to own a car, even though the city's grid of narrow canals and streets was clearly not designed for that. To him, cars were a human right. And in 1965, he told the Parliament of Amsterdam that if the city didn't accommodate cars, people would just move out. He said, "We must have a fundamental change of policy. Now it's, if you don't own a car, you can live here. Why should someone who does want to own a car live here? You have to be able to live in the city center if you have a car. Otherwise, you're going to drive out of the city." And while this prediction turned out to be wrong, he was definitely onto something. Cars were becoming increasingly affordable, and people loved them. Cities simply had to adapt if they didn't want to get left behind. And this brings us to the genius plan, or maybe insane plan, depending on how you look at it. We'll let you decide. The idea was simple: build massive parking garages everywhere. This was pretty easy to do in the suburbs, but Oud wanted parking in the historic center too. So he tried to come up with some creative solutions. One of those ideas was Amsterdam Central Station. As we mentioned earlier, the station was constructed in the 19th century when trains were not nearly as popular. As soon as cars started taking over, it became clear that there wasn't enough room for everyone to park. The initial design of the station only included a small bus station on the south side of the tracks. By the 1960s, this needed to change. Unfortunately, there wasn't much room for expansion. Surrounding the station were rail lines, a canal, and a busy road. But if you zoom in on the map, you'll notice something else. Right above the train station is Amsterdam's biggest park. So instead of adding another parking garage to the surface, why not build one directly on top? This meant that the city wouldn't have to remove any historic buildings, and the park itself was mostly empty anyways. That probably doesn't sound like a good idea to you, but back then it seemed amazing. Just imagine having a giant parking garage right next to the train station. People could easily transfer from their car to the train and vice versa. The idea was so good that it won an award from the Royal Dutch Association of Civil Engineers. The design consisted of 2 levels. The first level would include a full ring road around the entire park, including parking for 1,500 cars. This would be covered by a green roof, so nobody would know that a parking garage even existed. Above that would be a second-level parking garage with space for 350 cars. While that still sounds like a terrible idea today, at the time this was seen as brilliant, and it led to the transformation of Amsterdam into a car-centric city. Today, this plan would never get approved. But from the 1960s until the 1980s, Amsterdam basically did whatever was necessary to accommodate cars. Neighborhoods had to be demolished to make way for new roads and highways. New bridges were added to existing canals, and sometimes whole canals were filled in. Some people are still mad about this today and call places like the Westerpark and the Borneo or spots, meaning wasteland in Dutch. But at the time, this was the only way to keep up with the growing number of cars. Unfortunately, this didn't solve Amsterdam's traffic problems. The city's intricate network of canals and small streets just couldn't accommodate all the traffic, but they kept building more roads anyway. By 1978, Amsterdam had spent over 1 billion guilders on new roadways. That's about 230 million euros. And even though traffic was still bad, they kept building. The last major highway project was completed in 1988, and by then it was clear that something needed to change. The air quality was terrible, nobody could get anywhere on time, and the city's historic character was being destroyed. But what's funny is that even today, Amsterdam still struggles to find a balance between cars and everything else. You've probably seen plenty of pictures of Amsterdam and its beautiful bike paths and canals. But if you look closely, you'll also notice plenty of cars. In fact, over half of all households in Amsterdam have a car, even though there are better alternatives. And the city's population keeps growing, meaning more people and more cars in the future. Maybe Amsterdam's genius plan wasn't so genius after all. But if you'd like to learn more about the city's unique urban fabric, I've linked a video about Amsterdam's canals and how they shaped the city. Thanks for watching.